Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. Emily Nichols nudges technical people to embrace their human skills so they can become better problem solvers, team players, and leaders. She's a professional engineer, and I mean that very seriously. She has a bachelor's in science in systems engineering and a master's of science in chemical engineering, with more than 15 years of experience in manufacturing and innovation. Emily's worked with organizations like PepsiCo, PPG, Janssen, Henkel, improving products and processes all over the place, from breakfast cereals to automotive paint and electrical steel. Emily easily connects at all levels of organizations, inspiring that deeper understanding and the collaborative teamwork. Today, we are going to talk about how embracing a spark in early 2020 led to the creation of her incredible studio. We are going to dig into the joy that comes from designing your own creative space, such as a wedding during a pandemic, and her amazing workshop called Drawn Together, where she will show people how simple sketches bring us together and create a shared understanding. I was so fortunate to participate in a workshop led by Emily, and let me tell you, this program proves that we can draw, and it explains why we should. So hold on to your hard hats. It's time to find a spark of inspiration from the woman that summarized her chemical engineering master's thesis in 5 Dr. Seuss rhymes. Without further ado, it's Emily Nichols. Emily, welcome to One Spark Stories podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. Katie, thanks.
I want to start off by learning a bit about your past before we dig into who you are now, because I think that our childhood, our endeavors, our explorations are really a good hint at who we are now. And I want to test my theory, especially as somebody with that creative spark. So tell me, what was your creative outlet as a kid? And I'm thinking the younger, we'll say 5-year-old, 8-year-old Emily, what did you love to do to get that creative outlet?
Oh, Katie, hardly anybody knows this. Kudos to you. I've never been asked this question before on a podcast. You know what? I loved to create plays and direct plays. So I'm the oldest of 3 kids, and my 2 sisters were, under my direction. They took my direction well. And so, back when we used to get groceries in paper bags, there were all of these paper bags in the house, and so we would turn them upside down and draw faces on them and cut out eye holes and mouth holes and make up plays and put them on for our parents.
Do you have any of them recorded somewhere?
Oh, no, not a thing.
You won't even admit it if you did, but that's okay.
And we were mostly Disney characters. I mean, I was always trying to draw Mickey Mouse. It always frustrated me that my Mickey Mouse drawings never quite looked like the real thing, but there were mouse ears on everything.
That's fantastic. And it's so funny you mentioned that, because my cousins at Christmas, we would get together and it was a full production, which all the adults loved because we'd be gone for hours setting up. So, it's kindred spirits right now. I understand that play and creative. Now, with that theatrical draw, was there somebody that you looked up to as a kid, that maybe it was, somebody in theater or Mickey Mouse? Who was that you looked up to as, wow, they really are living a life that I think is cool and would love to be?
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, so I'm going to test your knowledge of Canadian culture here, Katie.
Oh, geez. Okay.
My childhood hero was Mr. Dress Up. Okay. And Mr. Dress Up had a show on CBC television, and it was not the same as Mr. Rogers, but, kind of like that's probably the best comparison you can make. So Mr. Dress Up was always making things, and as his name suggests, dressing up. He had this tickle trunk, which was a red trunk with flowers all over it, and he would open it up and see what's in the trunk today, and he would put on the costume, and there were puppets in the show, and he also would draw and cut things out, make crafts out of paper, and I just thought he was so cool. So you know what? Just last week, I was doing a workshop, and I often use my flip chart and I sketch even when I'm not talking about drawing. And I asked the crowd, hey, is my whatever it was, is it believable? And someone said, you're as good as Mr. Dress Up. And I said, you made my day. That's what I always wanted to be.
Just close the book. Your life purpose has been fulfilled. That is awesome. And I have not actually ever seen Mr. Dress. I have to look this up. So thank you for opening my eyes to the Canadian version, loosely, of a Mr. Rogers. Good people. That is so funny. Now, was there something else as a kid that maybe, or moving into that adulthood, young adult, that really told you, okay, it's time to embrace this creativity and move forward and find ways to make it come to life? Was there a moment as you moved into a career, or have you always just held on to that creativity?
No, I would say I probably lost it along the way for quite a while, in some ways. I mean, if I look carefully, it was always there. But, as the school grades progressed, the focus shifts somewhat to what's more practical and what's going to get you a good job, or what courses you need to keep doors open and things like that. So if I look back as far as grade 2, 3, 4, I'm writing books. And if you read the little bio in the book, it says Emily hopes to be an author when she grows up. And, by grade 7 or 8, that whole idea is gone. Mm-hmm. And I'm focusing on math and science in high school, and then I'm taking an engineering degree, and it all kind of dissipates because, well, I don't know, it's just that the focus becomes efficiency and being smart and getting things done and being respected for the knowledge side of things. And so it kind of disappears until well, I mean, I'm still doing creative projects on the side, I guess, but maybe like mid-30s, I get a little bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in you saying that, though, because many of the listeners and people I've engaged with have expressed just that they know what they loved and what brought them to life. And now they're really trying to find it and trying to reconnect it. And I am so grateful that I got to experience part of what you're doing to help people connect with that creative side. In fact, if you're happening to watch the video or clips on the YouTube channel, I've even got some charts back here from when you did a session within one of the communities. So if you could share brief overview, a little snippet of what you do now within the creative space, we'll say.
Sure. Well, right now, everything that I do is under the umbrella of human skills for technical people. So that includes this creative spark, right? Bringing this creative spark back to people like me who've lost it along the way, with a focus on math, science, efficiency. I worked for a long time in manufacturing, so it's all about making everything more efficient, more cost effective, higher quality. And so this kind of expansive thinking doesn't come around as often. So when I think it was about my mid-30s, I had this amazing experience. I was at a creativity conference, which how I got there is a story in itself. But I was at this creativity conference, and there were 2 workshops that weekend that I participated in that were about drawing. And they were both amazing. And one of them was just, I felt like an amazing transformation, because remember, I had loved Mr. Dress Up as a kid. I hadn't thought about him for a really long time, but suddenly I find myself in this workshop and discovering that even though I consider myself to be absolutely terrible at drawing, I can create things that are recognizable. And, a lot of times we have ideas in our minds or concepts we're trying to convey to someone that's really difficult to do in words. but we persist with the words. Our worlds are full of text messages and email, and that's what's expected in our workplaces for the most part. And so when you discover, wow, I actually can draw some simple things that help get my point across, now you can convey ideas you couldn't convey before. You can create shared understanding you couldn't do before. And I loved that so much that I thought, someday I want to be the person at the front of the room teaching this, because it was absolutely transformational. And it turns out that the person presenting that workshop is one of my neighbors. And so in the intervening years, he really wasn't teaching that material anymore. And I still thought, wow, we got to do something bigger with this. And so we've been collaborating and kind of taking that material out of hibernation and developing it further. And I'm presenting workshops, and we're hoping to put out a book on it as well.
Look, there's the author. It's coming true.
Yeah, someday.
That is so cool. I think that is really neat that you took this opportunity and said, you know what, there is something, because there is such a perception that I'm not an artist. I was of the mindset that I hated grades in an art class because I am not a Picasso. I am not Frida Kahlo. Like, I can't replicate that work, but I can understand the concept. And so, learning the concept and applying it is very valuable, but I feel that for many, that's where they lost that spark in art. And we're like, I'm not a good artist. I can't draw. What do you do to help people unlearn that mindset? And, maybe it's through that course that you've done with others and the Drawn Together. How do you help people stop thinking so negatively about their version of art?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, people need to realize that they're not alone. And by illustrating this kind of life trajectory on how most people experience art and drawing skills and all of that, people realize, hey, I'm not alone. The vast majority of adults say they can't draw. So there's a very good reason I feel this way. It's not really about me. It's about the collective. And then really it comes down to showing them how to put some simple shapes on the page. I mean, you experience this. And so it's things like, okay, first we're going to draw a set of round brackets, and now 3 sticks, and a circle. And it's just describing those simple shapes. And then people go, oh, hey, wow, I just drew a person. And here's 3 other ways you could draw a person. And they're all very simple. And it's transformative.
Yes, it is. And it's one of the key learning and communicating principles that a lot of people seem to look over. In order for information to be shared and received, some people learn it verbally, some are kinesthetic, and some are visual. And so you are tapping into that visual component that we often overlook as adults. It's like, don't use your fingers to do math. Well, I always will. And don't do this, don't do that. Why not? If it's going to get the product, then we certainly need to. So what are some other ways that you have created as you're seeing a need, or, bringing that creative piece to organizations? Is there a common, oh gosh, there's probably so many different misnomers or misunderstandings around it, but are you seeing a common thread in especially adults?
Well, I think, the common thread that brings all of my work together is this idea of human skills for technical people. And what it comes down to is that in order to take a technical degree and advance in a technical career, a lot of the focus is on developing ever more advanced analysis skills and things like that. And what gets left behind are these ideas of human connection and communication and creativity. And so, that's the common thread for me, is that my audience is by and large technical folks who have maybe just forgotten some of those, the things I learned in kindergarten, how to connect with someone before you correct them, or before you even, in the name of efficiency, we leave a lot of those things behind. I've been guilty of this too. And I know early in my career, for one thing, I was always hurrying everywhere, hurrying from one meeting to another. And you know what? Unknowingly, I was giving off the perception that I did not have time for people, or that I was too good to stop and say hello. And those simple things are so important. And people already know this. They just need a reminder. So that's what I'm here for, to remind them of those things that they've left behind.
It's something that we often hear people talk about with new employees or the younger generation. They don't have soft skills, right? Like it's something that we see in people that are new to an industry, and yet it is ever present all over the place. So I love that you're calling it out and helping people see that it's okay to own that. It's okay to say, you know what, maybe I do need to take a step back and smile. And we could go a whole soapbox of don't ever tell me to smile, let me do it. But showing the value of a smile is certainly helpful. Now, is it within that? So you mentioned your key audience. Is it typically, engineers? Are you seeing more of trades? Where would you be directing that work?
So engineers, first of all, and then other professions who have similar experiences. So accountants, for example, their worlds, less about words and more about numbers. But they can benefit from the drawing experience too. They can benefit from a lot of the same lessons that I have learned from spending so much time on the factory floor. And it's just, stepping away from this idea of accuracy being the first priority to making the human connection the first priority, so that then you can have clear communication, see it from someone else's point of view. Right? We see this with technical people of all kinds. If you slightly generalize something so that it's not quite accurate, they want to correct you. And that kind of gets in the way of discussing the matter at hand and connecting with each other to see alternative perspectives. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense, because for me, as one of those woo-woo connector relationship builders, I've often been met with that resistance when I work with more technical minds. And it's helpful to have somebody like yourself that can bridge that gap, that can say, well, wait, there's value in this and in this. So it's the yes and philosophy. Yes, your technical efficiency is very valuable, and the execution is coming to our customers or our colleagues this way through. So it's a beautiful bridge. Now, for others that are noticing this gap and that are really wanting to share their message with organizations, maybe it's not creativity, maybe it's something else. How have you found yourself communicating it? Do you go places? Do you have, I know you've got your own studio, right? You've got a whole setup. How is that engagement different now than maybe what it was even before the pandemic started?
Well, so as you said, I have a studio in my basement, and doing a lot more things remotely, as everyone is. And building the human connection over the Zoom call, like we're doing now, is so much more challenging than being in a physical space with somebody. And so this is something I've prototyped my way through the whole pandemic. So I had a speaking engagement in March 2020 that was canceled at the last minute. And I was really disappointed because neither I nor the organizers of this event were capable at that time of switching to a virtual event, right? This was something a lot of us had never done, myself included. And this basement space that you see me in right now, it was dark down here. It was just full of shelving. It was just storage. I was in the hardware store on the very last day before the stores closed in March 2020, looking for some lights that would light up this space a little bit. I bought a couple of construction lights and hung them up from the ceiling. And I basically prototyped the whole studio. Like, where did I want the camera? I was using cardboard boxes and old furniture and stacking them up in various configurations to see how it would all work. And always with this idea of how do we get back to great eye contact? Like, how can I be looking right into the camera to make that person feel like I'm paying attention to them, make that audience feel like I'm looking right at them? Meanwhile, I need to see the screen in order to see what their faces are doing in response to what I'm saying. And so that was probably the biggest challenge of all. I was just constantly trying to figure out how can I get better eye contact. The other things, the lighting, the sound, those are fairly easy to do. And basically, I borrowed equipment from friends at first until I could figure out what I wanted. Of course, I did lots of online research so that I wasn't investing a huge amount of capital right up front only to find out I had the wrong thing.
Hmm.
And so right now I'm looking at you through my camera, and I actually have my screen behind the camera. And I always rearrange my Zoom windows so that your face, if I'm only talking to one person, so their face is right above the barrel of my camera. And therefore I get to see your face while I'm looking straight into the lens, and that's great. Now, when I have a bigger group, it's a little bit more challenging. I have this monitor behind my camera, 34 inches wide. See, now I'm getting into the technical brain. I'm telling you all the features.
I love it. I love it.
But when I present to a larger audience, I'm more typically standing up and standing further back from the screen. And so if my eyes wander a little bit away from the camera, it's not as noticeable to the audience. And I also have another camera over here on my right, which shows me right beside the flip chart. And you've seen that in the workshop, so that I can draw on the flip chart for folks.
It's like you knew I was going to ask you to explain how you make it happen, and you just walked right into it. So thank you. The eye contact piece is something that is so challenging with the virtual engagement. And I have even gotten to a point where I'll expand my screen so much, including now, where I don't even see myself. I don't want myself on camera, because I know for about 1.5 years when doing all these virtual engagements, I'd be like, oh, that hair looks weird. And I would lose track of whatever was happening. So worried about, not looking foolish, when in turn, everybody's now looking at me like grooming or doing something random. No. So I love that you just shared those little tips, because as much as, ideally you're able to help with these relationship building skills and the human aspects, ideally in person, it's just not always going to be the case. And so your ability to innovate and create is exactly what allows you to keep moving forward with it. So I also have to mention, because I do love you have shared some of your own creative life moments, specifically thinking about a wedding for a previous guest and another very close family member of yours. So do you mind sharing? I just love not just the story, but the video that you put together. Could you tell a little bit about, during a pandemic, how one could handle this whole wedding experience?
The wedding experience. All right. Well, my sister and my brother-in-law were supposed to get married, and they rescheduled it 2-3 times, I don't know, and they decided, we're done waiting, we're going to do this during the pandemic, whatever we need to do. And when they called us to tell us, I was expecting them to say, hey, we already got married, which I was prepared to be excited for. But instead they said, we're going to get married, it's in 2 weeks, and it's on Zoom. And I was like, oh no, because that felt like, oh, I wanted to be there, unless they had already done it, which is so funny. I was okay if they'd already done it and I wasn't there. Anyway, so, you mentioned earlier, yes, and this was a moment, if there ever was one, for yes, and. So I moved very quickly through that, oh, this sucks, to, okay, how can I make this amazing? And as you know, my brother-in-law, Lee Kitchen, he is just such a great creative, he's the magical dude. His name
He
says
really
it all.
is. Yeah.
And I gave him that name, by the way, Katie. I helped him with that branding.
It couldn't have been said any better. So major kudos, hats off, all the win to you. That was perfect.
So anyway, I knew he had a vision, right? And he's very good at conveying what his vision is to participants in his workshops, to guests of a party or anything like that. And so when they sent the email saying how this was all going to happen, then I could see the opportunity to say yes, and okay, they're going to do the wedding ceremony on Zoom, and then there's going to be a dinner. The wedding ceremony was on Twitch, and then there's going to be a dinner on Zoom. So, okay, now I can picture this, right? That means for the ceremony, we're going to be watching it, right? We won't be on camera. Then when we're having dinner, yes, we're going to be on camera. We're going to be interacting with the guests. So I'm thinking through all of the different parts and pieces. And basically, we got to create this experience for ourselves at home. And that's what Lee and Sarah were hoping for, that we would do that, right? So I already had a dress because I was expecting them to get married soon. So, the idea was to dress for the occasion. and to design the experience, even though we're here in our own house, my husband and I, not with anybody else, to design the experience for ourselves. So I decorated our TV, for example. That's where we're going to be watching the wedding, right? So I had decorations around the TV and knew we'd be sitting on the couch. And then when it was time for dinner, we were going to be at the dining room table. So we took some of this studio equipment from the basement and moved it up to the dining room and, created a backdrop that went along with the themes of some of the things that Sarah and Lee like and kind of the colors they had picked out. And, my whole disappointment at not being able to be there in person just totally evaporated. It was one of the most unique experiences I'll probably ever have. And I found that it was so possible to be very present, even though I couldn't be there in person.
Oh, seriously, I just got chills because it's those yes and moments. It's embracing that spark of opportunity, that perfect example of how, as much as it could have just been tears of sadness that you weren't able to be there with them live, it shifted to certainly still some sadness that you couldn't be in person, but just that joy, and to what you said, an experience that you never would have imagined having. So I implore everybody else that is in a moment where you think, man, I can't get to this situation, or I can't feel like I'm or I don't feel like I'm connecting with somebody in a different way. Change it up. Put paper bag Mickey ears on your computer screen and pretend that you are now talking to the mouse with the most. I don't know, find a way to just bring that joy to the everyday things that we do. So thank you so much for sharing that story, because we overlook those opportunities to create by overthinking what creativity really is. And it's through those little actions, engaging spaces. So big question I love to ask people is, what is it that you see most people need to unlearn? And I think we tapped a bit into this early on. What is something you really just wish people could unlearn? My mind's going towards creativity, but about anything.
Yeah, I think that people with a similar background, education to me, engineering, manufacturing, where the focus is relentlessly on improving productivity, efficiency, we need to unlearn that that's the sole focus. We need to unlearn that the mechanics of the system are more important than the people in it. And that's really what my whole purpose is. Now, when it comes to creativity, what I think people need to unlearn is this idea of I'm not creative. And I'm sure that's come up for you with other guests before. People say I'm not creative, or people tell me I'm not an artist. Hang on a minute. I'm not asking you to be an artist. We're just going to we're going to make some simple pen strokes on a page, some simple strokes of the marker that can bring more meaning to the message you're trying to get across. That's all we're trying to do.
Love it so much. And I just could celebrate you in many ways because of the work that you're doing to, help bring that technical and really the A and B, type A, all of the type of brains together to realize we actually do have it in us. It's just unleashing it in your own unique way. So thank you for continuing to do that. Where can people best connect with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, on the YouTube, and at emilynichols.com. And guess what? I'm going to spell it out for you because so many people get this, well, I'm going to say wrong, but it just happens there's a lot of different spellings of Emily and Nichols. So it's EMILYNICHOLS.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, before we go, I want to flip the script. What is something that you are so proud of and that you need to celebrate within yourself? We don't take enough time to stop and give our own kudos. So if you could really, say, Emily, I am so proud of you for this. What is something you would really pat yourself on the back for?
Oof. I feel a bit stumped, Katie. You go first.
Oh, geez. No, you're not supposed to flip the script. You know what? I will say it's that I am relentlessly pursuing the podcast work. It is just a passion project. And so for me, the fact that I have not given up on the love I have to connect with people, that is something I'm like, high five, Katie, you did it. You got another week up. You got another awesome person to join. So that's where I'll go with it.
Very good. Well, I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of things I should appreciate myself for, but right at this moment, I'm here in the studio and I'm really grateful to my past self for setting up all this equipment so that we could have a conversation like this today, so that we can connect as well as we have today, even though we can't be in the same place.
Yes. And that foresight you had to get the construction lights and get it together is something you should definitely celebrate. Well, Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to others continuing to have that experience to really embrace that spark of creativity and technical. So thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you again, Emily, for sharing that spark of inspiration on the value of bringing creativity into the technical spaces many of us exist in. Please make sure to share this episode with others looking for that creative spark, and make sure to rate and review the show. Those are always what help get these conversations in front of others that are looking for that spark of inspiration. As always, be well, stay curious, and we'll see you real soon.
Did you know that 72% of people have creative insights in the shower? Oh boy.
Later, Tater.